Hello and welcome to Shite Talk, an Irish history podcast. My name's Kevin Larney and welcome back to Season 3 of this Irish history podcast. I haven't got Jason with me this week, and this is a very long episode, so I won't bother with much up front. Just to say, we've almost reached our first goal amount on Buy Me Coffee, which will cover our subscription for the year, so thanks a million for everyone who's given us money to that so far. And you can follow us on Instagram at Shite Talk History. If you're bored during this quarantine season, why not send us a story you want us to do on shitetalkhistory@gmail.com. And that's pretty much it. Hope this episode finds you well. Here's Erskine Childers and the Howth Gun-Running.
There is sorrow in me heart, oh me old Howth Gun, since we lately hath apart, oh me old Howth Gun. In Ireland's day of need, you proved a friend indeed. When you made the bullet speed, oh me old Howth Gun.
On the 25th of June, 1870, Robert Erskine Childers was born in London, England. So right off the bat, how do you pronounce that name?
Londonderry.
London. I've been saying Childers most of my life, and I think that's I've just been wrong most of my life.
I would say Erskine Childers.
Erskine Childers. Yeah. Let's go with that.
Like how you'd pronounce like children, like children.
If you're from the border counties and you're talking about the young'uns, the Childers. Whatever his name is, that's when he was born. He was the second of 5 children, birthed in part by Robert Caesar Childers and Anna Mary Henrietta Barton of Glendalough House.
I would say that she did most of the birthing, but fair enough.
You would say that, you dirty feminist, but I would say he's the better name of the two.
I will quickly say her name again.
Her name, Anna Mary Henrietta Barton. His name, Robert Caesar Childers.
I mean, 2 phenomenal names, Kevin. That's
a lot of great names.
Hairs there.
I'm going to throw this in. I don't know if you know about wine. I don't know what this is. But Anna Maria was related to the Chateau Lagon-Barton winery in Bordeaux. She came from wine money.
Did you just ask me, did I know anything about wine? Having worked for 2 full months.
What I did there is I just assumed you know nothing about wine.
No, I worked for 2 full months in one of Ireland's premier off licenses. Redmond.
Oh, I thought that was the end of your brag. I thought you were just going to say, I worked for 2 full months. Yeah. Of course I know about wine. I'm part of the gentry.
Yes, just to get through the days, Kevin. Just to get to lunch.
Yes, I know of wine.
Yeah, no, I know a little bit. You've got your red, you've got your white.
Whoa! Slow down there. You're a sommelier.
Rosé.
But I like. What do you call it when you mix white wine with 7-Up? That's the one I like.
A spritzer.
Yeah.
Is that right? I don't know. I think it is. I worked in that off license. Don't know anything about wine. They tried to teach me. I know a little bit more about craft beer because I have an interest in that. But no, with wine, not at all. I remember at one point...
You know a bit more about craft beer because you're a 20-something-year-old white man with a beard.
Yeah. And it's a good ruse. It's a good it's a good excuse for alcoholism. Because you're like...
Yeah.
Because otherwise... Like 10 years ago, if you just said, "Oh, what are you drinking?" "Oh, I'm drinking this 12%." You were drinking what now? It's like, "Oh, it's a 12% beer." It's like, you're trying to kill yourself. No. I like the taste. It's really cool. It's a triple porter peach stout. Shut your mouth. That's what you're doing is you're covering something up. No person should have to drink a 10% beer. It shouldn't be your favorite beer. What you should have is 2 cans of, I was going to say Miller High Life. People in Ireland won't get that. Harp.
You shut your mouth. So is that his mam from Wine Money? His father, Robert Caesar Childers. Did you know, Jason, that Caesar? Well, yeah, Caesar's from Julius Caesar, but it is also where Tsar is derived from, and Kaiser, all from the title Caesar.
Like Kaiser Sose.
Exactly like Kaiser Sose.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, that's a little interesting fact. Yeah. Remember, much like the end of that film, when it turned out that Kevin Spacey was a massive pedophile.
Yeah. While we're on Kevin Spacey, I should reference the fact that I was on a podcast there last week called Truish Crime by Workshed Productions. I'll put up a link anyway. It's a true crime podcast where we talk about films that are linked to true crime events in real life. So we talked about Kevin Spacey's portrayal of Martin Cahill as the general, basically, in what is it, 2001, 2003's film Ordinary Decent Criminal. Have you seen?
Really? Kevin Spacey plays Martin Cahill?
Yeah, so it happened. It's like the Hollywood adaptation of you know The General with Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah.
Yeah. They made The General first, and then they were like, "Oh, that's a good movie. What we should do is replace all the cast and make it terrible."
Fair.
But it's one of Colin Farrell's early movies. There's some terrible lines of dialogue, some ridiculous filmmaking. Great watch for anyone. It's terrible film. But have a listen to that podcast. Have a listen to me making jokes and talking about it, and then come back and download more episodes of Shite Talk.
Listeners, you don't feel obliged to do that. Don't listen to it.
Don't feel obliged to download episodes of our podcast.
Download our podcast. Don't support Jason's efforts to go onto other podcasts. I was not informed of this. I do not endorse this. This is a complete deviation from our contract, and you will be hearing from my lawyer, which is, if you could put me in touch with your dad, that would be handy. Thank you. He does good work. Well, unlike your dad, when Erskine was 6, his dad died of tuberculosis. And his mother, although she was seemingly fine, she was put into an isolation hospital, I guess, to make sure she didn't have TB. And luckily she died after 6 years, so that really would have killed off any TB that she could have been harbouring. The 5 children are sent to Glendalough to live with the Barton family. So this Glendalough house, I guess, is a manor house in Glendalough, County Wicklow. I think every family on the East Coast has a photo in their house somewhere of them on that beach in Glendalough.
Did you watch the first Twilight movie and see when they're running through like the woods? And when you watched that, did you think, Jesus, that looks a lot like Glendalough?
No. Okay. I haven't seen any of the Twilight films.
Well, so what was Erskine's deal then?
His parents are dead. He has to move to Glendalough to stay with his mother's side of the family, the Bartons. They recommend, or he gets sent off to Hailbury College, which is, I think, effectively a grooming school for the East India Trading Company. People get trained up to go and work and live in India. And then he went on to Trinity College, Cambridge, where he studied classical tripos. When he was in Cambridge, he was the editor of the Cambridge Review and president of the Trinity College Debating Society, which was called the Magpie and Stump Society because why not? It's merry olding.
How many people are usually on a debate team?
Is it 3?
If it is, then they should have called their team name the Holy Trinity.
They should have. Although that'd be a very Catholic thing to do.
Sure, Catholics couldn't spell, let alone debate, Kevin.
That's true. So around this time, Erskine's cousin Hugh Childers was working for Home Rule in Ireland, but Erskine spoke against his policies and his debating society. So yeah, Erskine
was a bastard.
He's head of the debating society, but a lot of accounts said he wasn't very good at debating. So who knows? He injured his hip before he went to Cambridge, which left him a bit lame for the rest of his life, and dashed its hopes of earning a Rugger's Blue.
The fact that he was in a debating society is what made him lame for the rest of his life.
But he injured his hip, so he couldn't get his Rugby Blue, but he became a proficient rower instead, after encouragement from his friend, the first Viscount Walter Runciman of Doxford. And then on his account, he got into
Did you mean to say Viscount?
No, Viscount, like the biscuit.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Pretty confident here. It's Viscount.
Yeah, it probably is.
I love finding these things out, like, you know, your black spots, because we all have like a lot of shit that we don't know.
Yeah.
Or things that we've just gotten wrong over the years. But it stuck out to me because there was a while there where my nickname was within a certain group of people was Mr. Viscount, because I've got them minty biscuits, which is a sentence I woke up remembering from a heavy night of drinking in Iceland the other year, and I've never been able to find out why that was, or why I had said that, or why that was a thing. But seemingly I was pretty adamant about it that night, that I was Mr. Viscount because I got them minty biscuits.
This is new knowledge to me. Mr. Viscount.
It was new knowledge to me the next day as well. It was all Lost in a haze, but blame the Northern Lights.
Aurora Borealis. Well, Mr. Fisk, check out these minty biscuits. So he's sent to Hillbury College, goes to Cambridge University, debating society, would have been up for the rugby blues if he hadn't injured himself.
When he didn't make it playing rugby, then he really got a case of the rugby blues.
That's it exactly, Jason. Got big into sailing and rowed for Cambridge. He's probably the most waspy man on the go. Do you know that acronym?
WASP?
Yeah, like White Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
I didn't.
Yeah. I was watching that movie about, it was like that animated film from the late 90s about the life of bugs, and it featured, like just a bug's day-to-day life and the lively antics of the bugs.
Oh,
you remember Antz?
Antz, yeah.
Yeah, that was the one. Which is extremely... It is Woody Allen as the ant and Sylvester Stallone as some other thing. It's like
that is a weird, actually, when you think about it. Yeah, you forget about animation like that. Woody, Sylvester Stallone was what? Was he like an evil ant or a big?
No, he was some sort of tough. Yeah, he was a tough ant.
Yeah, and why do they do that with animation?
Yeah,
that like Woody Allen will play a diminutive small ant, and then you'll have Dwayne the Rock Johnson playing this giant hulking voice. We're not actually looking at the people; it's just voices, and there's voice actors. They can do anything. You don't have to pick the person that looks like that person.
That's a very good point. But anyway, I was watching this children's film, and there's two wasp characters that come in, and they have these really I think they're called like Mitzi and I don't know, whatever. They've got like really British tough accents, and then I realized halfway through it's because they're wasps. So there you go.
Ah, great joke.
We're laughing and learning.
Yeah. Damn. No, that is actually pretty awesome. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that film now.
It is actually genuinely a pretty good film. Like it's one of those weird films that it went over my head as a child. It's worth a watch. I don't know what the moral of the story is, but anyway, stop listening to this podcast and go watch Antz. So old Erskine had plans to follow his cousin into Parliament as an MP. So he entered into the House of Commons in 1895 as a junior committee clerk with high hopes. So it's unsurprising based on his upbringing. He's a firm believer in the British Empire. And in 1898, when the Boer War breaks out in South Africa, Erskine went off to serve the British forces as a member of the Honourable Artillery Company. So do you know about the Boer War?
I don't.
So the Transvaal people rose up against the British in what's now South Africa, led by a man called Paul Kruger, which, when I was a kid... Kruger, yes. But when I was a kid, we had a dog, and we called it Kruger, because my grandfather called his dog Kruger. He recommended the name. He died before I could ask him
before he could learn the error of his ways.
Yeah, but he died before I could ask him what the name was, or like where, or maybe he did tell me and I didn't understand because I was a kid. But I said no one ever knew. Like, Kruger's a weird name. And then I was reading Playboy of the Western World, and it's set in like early 1900s Mayo, and they're talking about going off to fight Kruger in the Boer War. So I reckon he named his dog after Paul Kruger, because I suppose he would have been seen as a hero. Like, this is the first revolution really against the British, where they kind of win, and maybe people back in Ireland thought that was a good thing and named their dogs after this guy. Or is naming your dog after someone an insult?
No, I think it's a good thing.
I think it is a good thing. I think people like dogs.
Yeah.
So, but then inadvertently, I think our childhood dog was named after this South Africa or Transvaal revolutionary leader, who in later life I think might have been quite racist in South Africa, which I know is shocking. But there you go. That's just a little aside about my dog.
That is no. I'm glad you've brought that up. It's going to show that you have a human side. It's nice that you've got some canines on the go.
Oh, the dog's long dead now.
Oh, that's sad.
It is.
I only knew it was called Kruger instead of Kruger or whatever because of that famous video on YouTube. The is it Battle of Kruger Park or You know, it's Kruger National Park, probably named after. Oh shit! You think it's named after that dude? Just put that together.
Oh, it's a national park named after him. Yeah. So yeah, Erskine knew all about Kruger. He went off to show him what's what. He set sail in February, but saw very little action. The first time he came under fire was June, and in August he was evacuated from the front line with trench foot. So a 7-day journey back to Pretoria, he met a Corkman. He spent the 7 days travelling with him, and he noted how loyal the men were to Britain and how resistant they were to incitement in support of Home Rule. So he was glad to see the good Irish rowing in behind the British, and no talk of all this Home Rule nonsense. He returned to his unit, but was dispatched back to good old Blighty in October 1900. So during his time there, he'd written many long descriptive letters about the war to his sisters Dulcibella and Constance. I think we've already covered how much of a British man this man is.
Yeah. You sure? And his mother's name was Beatrice, and his dad's name was Oppressive Overlords.
Exactly. It's good to see you remembered. So the two sisters had a family friend who was connected to publishing, and they formed his letters into a book about the war in the ranks of CIV. So in 1903, he was promoted to Parliamentary Clerk of Petitions, and his book, The Riddles of the Sands, was published, based on his own sailing experiences, and it revolves around a fictional invasion of Britain by Germany.
I thought you were going to say it was based on Gigi D'Agostino's classic 90s hit,
Darude.
The Riddle.
Okay. No, but I'm sure that's where the influence came from.
Is the riddle near a tree by a river? There's a hole in the ground where an old man of Arran goes around and around.
Is this the riddle?
And his mind is a beacon in the veil of the night. For a strange kind of fashion, there's a wrong kind of right.
This is too much of a riddle.
Do you know this song?
I think I do.
He'll never ever fight over you.
So yeah, The Riddle is described as one of the first spy novels, and it was in the Observer's list of the top 100 novels of all time, including the Bible. The yacht in the book is called the Dulcibella, after his old sister. And it's involving a fiction invasion of Britain by Germany, which is interesting in 1903, but also he kind of writes favorably about the Kaiser. You know, compared to the propaganda that would come around in World War One, it's less about the damn Kaiser coming over here and invading good old Blighty, and it's more sort of cheeky, oh, those Germans up to their old tricks again, tried to sneak into Britain, which is
so he was a fan of them.
Exactly. So that same year in 1903, he's got promoted, his book's out, he heads off to America as a visit between his company of the artillery and the Ancient and Honourable Artillery Company of Boston, which is apparently the oldest chartered military organisation in North America and the third oldest in the world. When he was done that, he decides to hang around and explore New England by motorbike, that's pretty cool.
And that was a thing at the time?
I don't know how much of a thing that was. How long had motorbikes been around in 1903?
Yeah, I suppose, no, that makes sense.
Did it make, how many people would have been riding around America by motorbike at that stage? Surely it is a new enough thing.
Well, I can tell you, Kevin, because I know this offhand, because I have a phone in it. It's 1885 was the first ever internal combustion petroleum fueled motorcycle.
Well, then
it was actually a German thing at the time. So 1885. So yeah, they've been around for a while.
But it's been around for under 20 years. So definitely the idea of taking off around America on a motorbike is a new enough thing at this stage.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, the motorcycle diaries haven't been a thing yet.
Yeah,
we haven't seen James Dean yet, so it's still a cool new thing to do.
I am picturing him in a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and sunglasses. I don't know how popular that look was in 1903, but this is him. So one day when he's driving around, his motorbike breaks down in Beacon Hill, outside the house of one Dr. Hamilton Osgood. He knocked on the door looking for a spanner, and Osgood invited him in for dinner and introduced him to his daughter Mary. Childers married Mary,
Which nobody was expecting because everyone used to say that he wasn't Oz good enough for her.
Yes, exactly. But so he went in looking for a spanner, and Osgood was like, "Here's my daughter." And then, so that's 1903. They got married in January 1904, which is pretty quick.
Or a long wait back then, depending.
Maybe. I mean, but I guess this guy did just roll into town. I mean, again, we've already established he's essentially James Dean on the back of a motorbike. He's Osgood enough for old Daddy Hamilton, I think. So, yeah, Molly's parents were Dr. Osgood and Margaret Cushing Osgood from Boston, and they offered to buy the couple a yacht as a wedding gift, which is a pretty good wedding gift.
It's a pretty Osgood wedding gift.
It is pretty Osgood.
I'm going to stop making that joke now.
No, I think we should just do it for the rest of this episode. Dr. Osgood was a student of Louis Pasteur of milk fame. That's where he got his money from. But and they also claim to be able to trace their lineage back to the Mayflower, which, as I'm to understand in America, Jason, is a big deal.
The Mayflower or just pasteurized milk?
Both. People in America love pasteurized milk and citizens that can trace their lineage back to the Mayflower. And by gum, Dr. Osgood had it all.
It was the main reason people were on the Mayflower.
Looking for milk. This "Got Milk" was a very famous campaign slogan at the time. Europe didn't got milk, but America got milk. Right, so they say that they buy the newlywed couple a yacht for their wedding gift, which is a little ostentatious, but fuck it. So
that's what I say when I do fancy things in this city. When people say, "Jason, why are you spending your money so lavishly?" I say, "I'm just living ostentatiously."
Hey, that's fantastic. Why do you can't just live lavishly over in Austin, though? Jesus Christ, man! Guac with your burrito, come on.
I get to actually there's a taco shop, a little food truck right on my way to work as I'm cycling to work. I get 3 breakfast tacos. I know you hate the idea of breakfast tacos and breakfast burritos, Kevin,
yes,
but
established.
I love them. I think they're fantastic. I get 3 of those for $1.75 each. Which, quick maths, Kevin, what's it? 3 by 175.
It's got to be more than €1,000. I'm going to imagine.
Sir, it is about $4.25, leaving $1 tip. Man, with like the exchange rate, that's about €4.70. Then you're good until like next week. So I'm living well.
You're living large. My housemate has a whole setup here to make tacos. He wanted to start a van called Taco Cat, which, as I'm sure you noticed, Jason, is a palindrome.
Ah, is that where Mad Max fights?
Yes, in the palindrome. So Erskine had extensive sailing knowledge, and he wrote to Colin Archer. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, Jason, that he was a famous Norwegian shipbuilder. And
I thought animated spy.
That's Sterling Archer.
The
cartoon. So Erskine helped design the ship, and he put emphasis on the interior to accommodate his wife Molly. Molly had a serious skating accident when she was 3 and wasn't able to walk until she was 12, which is a long old time not to be able to walk.
That is damn.
Yeah.
Like, was that out of fear of falling over, or like she broke?
No, she broke. She had some sort of accident, and then she had to take a load of surgeries in between those years, and then was able to walk again by 12. But I guess she walked with some sort of limp. So the two of them have some sort of limp, and she had like lifelong pain because of it, but learned to sail in spite of it. So he designed the interior of the ship so that his lame wife could enjoy it, that's pretty nice. More than you do for your...
He painted it all beige.
Yeah. Exactly. So the couple returned to London, and Childers resumed working for the British House of Commons, which I didn't think that was the sort of job you could just like take 2 years off of and to go travelling around New England. And he came back with a wife, which maybe that was common for the time. Who knows?
I don't know. How long did you take off your job before you went to Iran?
I could see where you're going into this.
Yeah. Kevin, that's high and mighty from a dude who took 6 months off to travel around in the back of a van, who's just taken another 4 or 5 months off to travel around Australia while keeping the exact same job.
It's a hard life, okay? But I don't work in the House of Commons, you know? I work in the Dáil. It's much different.
Fair.
Um,
Yeah, so now roll back, apologize, and then you can continue the story.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know I support this guy. He left the House of Commons to go motorbiking around New England, and he came back with a wife, the daughter of a doctor, Jason. You know, that's this guy's he's a hero. So Molly is very well read and believed in the ideals of a republic, mostly because she's a rowdy Bostonian, I'd imagine. Didn't they threw all that tea in the harbour that time?
Yes.
Yes, that's just to get the Boston listenership on side. So she started to challenge Erskine's already faltering ideas about imperialism. Childer wrote Volume 5 of The History of War in South Africa, which was published in 1907. A great read. All 5 volumes are complete page-turners. But he drew attention to political and tactical mistakes made by British during the war, which, as a British officer, you're not supposed to do that. So he believed that with better negotiation, the war could have been avoided altogether. His book...
Is that not fair for every war in the history of the world?
That if it had been negotiated better, it wouldn't have happened?
Yes.
Yeah. True, I suppose. Well, I don't know. Some wars are seen on, like World War II, could you have avoided it without just giving Hitler all the land?
Yeah, so if we had a negotiated better...
Should have just given him Europe and then it would be done. Who are you?
And he wouldn't have had to have the war.
Who are you, Chamberlain? So his book, In War and the Arme Blanche, written in 1910, he recommended that instead of charging the enemy with lance and sabres, the cavalry should learn to fire from horseback, which I think you'll agree is pretty stupid. What sort of... I mean, you're in the cavalry. You're a gentleman. Of course you're going to charge with lance and sabre. What sort of a yahoo fires a gun from a horse? It's just unseemly.
Probably some googly-eyed fucker.
I'd imagine so. Some man with googly eyes on his helmet. So, in 1908, he took a holiday trip around the south and west of Ireland, and seeing the poverty there converted him to the idea of home rule.
Did you say the south and west of Ireland?
Yeah.
He didn't go near the southwest. It was just the south.
He just did the south
just
and the
west.
west. He couldn't face going to Kerry. It was too...
Kerry, he was like, fuck other voices, I'm done with Dingle.
Too many stag parties in Killarney. I'm just doing the west and the south. But, he saw some shit over there, Jason, and he started to think, maybe these people would be better off if they could rule themselves, perhaps. In autumn of 1910, he resigned as clerk of petitions and joined the Liberal Party, who were committed to home rule in Ireland. So he departed for South Africa as a good old Tory boy, but his ideas had started to become more liberal, probably due to his rowdy wife and actually going to Ireland and seeing what shit conditions people were living in. In 1911, he published his book, The Framework for Home Rule, advocating for full Dominion status for Ireland, so similar to what Canada had at the time. And he covered his cousin Hugh Childers in 1894 had a report called the Childers Commission.
How did you pronounce that 2 separate ways in the same
I'm
sentence?
hedging my bets. If I just say it wrong, then everyone's annoyed 50%, but everyone's satisfied 50%. It's called diplomacy, Jason. Alright, I'd suggest you look it up sometime.
Or if you just say it the one way, then 50% of people are still... Only 50% of the people are annoyed. Your way, 100% of people are annoyed.
Slightly annoyed. And then the rest of them are, kind of happy.
Yes, politics.
Yeah. But, so his cousin Hugh in 1894 wrote The Childers Commission, which showed that Ireland was paying more tax per capita than the rest of the UK, which is a bad thing. So now he's advocating for complete Dominion status, which is a departure from his previous stance of home rule and a departure of his party's policy. Also a massive departure from his earlier idea that they should just be in the British Empire and shut up about it. Or not even that, I think he genuinely thought that everyone loved the British Empire because he was in Cambridge and assumed that the whole rest of the empire was just like that.
And that is kind of like half of the time. I'm going to throw it out there as a number. Half. Like 50% of the time, Irish people get annoyed with English people. It's because of just like the general, I didn't even realise. Like, I've met multiple British people that don't realise that Ireland is two separate countries and they're not in charge of the country that I'm from.
And
They're just so far removed from any kind of context that they just don't think about it.
You set about starting this podcast in order to set the record straight. So in 1912, he was a candidate in the naval port town of Devonport. So he was pretty well known for his book Riddle of the Sands, which is pretty pro-navy. So yeah, he's a shoo-in in a city whose main thing is building ships. At this stage, the Home Rule Bill was up before Parliament and was passed by the House of Commons. So there was some reform in 1911 which meant that the bill couldn't be held back any later than 1914. So it was going to come into law in 1914, which means that the Unionists weren't very happy because they couldn't block the bill. So they said they'd resort to armed violence, which, if you know anything that happens over the next 100 years, is a bit of a turning point.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
Well,
but yeah.
on the 28th of September 1912, the Solemn League and Covenant was set up in Belfast to defeat the Home Rule Bill, and shortly after that, a couple of cheeky boys called the Ulster Defence Force, known colloquially as the UDF. So due to this, the Liberal Party wanted to amend the Home Rule Bill to separate Ulster from the rest of the country when it came to self-rule, and Childers disagreed with this policy and left the party over it. He walked. So the UDF made plans to import weapons from Germany, and on the 24th of April 1914, over 24,000 rifles and several million rounds of ammo landed in Larne, Bangor and Donaghadee. That's where we were. That's where we got the ferry out of that time, was Larne.
The time that we managed to drive from the south of Ireland, from the Republic, all the way into the north without showing an ID, get onto a ferry, not show any form of identification, sail all the way across to another landmass, arrive at that port, go out through security without ever showing our ID, and then doing the exact same on the way back.
Yes, also having driven a van and not have it opened or checked. Those were the bastion days. We'll look back on these as
2019.
The heady days.
Oh, what a time to be alive.
Yes. Well, yeah, gone are the days when two Irish boys driving a green van are deemed any sort of security threat by the British.
Back in the time when you couldn't travel over to Birmingham with an Irish accent and a beard and a bomb.
No, they didn't like that. In fairness, they still don't like it. But so the fact that the UDF could bring in all these guns from Germany, like it wasn't a secret. Like, people knew that this was happening, and the government didn't do anything to stop it. And then some senior British officers in Curra in Kildare said that they would resign if they were ordered to move against the UDF in this was referred to as the Curra Mutiny. But a lot of them had relations in the new UDF, and basically they agreed with their stance. So at the same time, the Irish volunteers were mostly drilling with wooden rifles and hurls.
But that's never brought up enough, by the way.
What?
That, like, they would use, like, the reason a hurl looks like that shit because it looks like a gun, and that's how they would hold it. They'd walk around in unison, use a hurl like it would be a gun with the sight at the end, at the top of the handle, and obviously the boss is the other part of it where you're going to hit it. But that's why the top of the handle has that little thing that comes out. It looks like a sight on the top of a gun. Like, one of the quintessential Irish pieces of culture, the hurley, is meant to be a machine gun that we were used as a way of disguising our military tactics from the British.
Is that where the hurl came from? I thought it was it goes way back.
Oh no, like, it would have been a thing anyway, but I'm saying that while we were trying to hide our military tactics, we would have walked around using a hurl in lieu of a machine gun.
Yeah.
And that I imagine that's where the sight would have come from, because no one holds a hurl by the top of it. You don't need that little thing that juts out to stop you from losing control of it. Everyone holds it way further down in the middle of the stick, or 3/4 of the way, or whatever the fuck. But so that's definitely what it is. It's just a gun. That's my hot take.
You know what? 100% agreed and subscribed. We're spitting hot takes this evening. So the Irish Volunteers formed in 1913 to protect Ireland, and the word got around quickly. A lot of people joined the group, but they were severely underarmed. Since the UVF had imported guns unimpeded, the Irish Volunteers figured that was good enough for them, and they wanted to get their own guns from Germany. But all of a sudden, the government decided that maybe having various national groups import weapons from a foreign nation wasn't a good idea, and they said, not a chance. So there was a group of Anglo-Irish and English liberals in London, if you could believe such a thing, who were understandingly alarmed at the idea of the UVF being able to get all these guns and the government doing nothing to stop them, and then the British Army saying, we agree with them.
No, they weren't doing nothing about it, Kevin. They were actively supporting.
They were saying, it's only boys being boys.
Sure, if you can't let the UVF have easy access to automatic machine guns, what can you do? This is the PC gone mad, Kevin. It's
you can't
PC
do anything
gone
anymore. So the committee included Sir Roger Casement, Alice Stopford Green, and Mary Spring Rice. The gang subscribed £15,000 old money to a gun-running fund to arm the Irish Volunteers, and Mary Rice suggested her old friend Erskine Childers as the man to ferry the guns. So she got in contact with Erskine and Darrell Figgis, who agreed to do the deal with Germany and get weapons from Hamburg. On the 28th of May, Figgis and Childers travelled to Hamburg to get 1,500 Mauser rifles and 49,000 rounds of ammo, which, if you're keeping score, is quite an awful lot less than what the UVF got. But
yeah, by like a lot, right?
Yeah, but
what I imagine the audience has the attention span, I don't know, some kind of an idiot like me. Could you give us those numbers again, Kevin?
24,000 rifles compared to 1,500, and then 49,000 rounds compared to several million. So, if we can go over to the maths corner there, Jason, could you verify that there is a difference between there?
That would be, yeah, there's a slight variance. There's a slight difference from the mean.
So the rifles dated back to the 1870s, when Erskine would have been a boy, and they had already been used by the German army. So it'd be the equivalent of nowadays buying used guns from the 1980s.
Or like an iPhone from 2 years ago.
Exactly. Not exactly cutting technology. So Podrick Pierce would later admit that the guns were antiquated pattern, without magazines, and were much inferior to the British service rifle. They had a terrible kickback and averaged 4 to 5 rounds a minute, and at the time the British were training with Lee Enfield rifles, which could handle 15 bullets per minute. Which I guess is still not an awful lot of bullets per minute, but still, again, more than 4 or 5.
Yeah, it's like 3 times as many. It's a lot.
When it comes to like shooting how many bullets you can get off in a minute, if someone's got 3 times an advantage over you, that's not good in military terms.
I would imagine there's any more. If someone said like I can shoot 7 bullets a minute, I can shoot 8. A minute's a long time. That extra, I don't know. I don't know about things. What I know about guns is they're heavier than you'd expect. When I shoot them, they make me feel like a man. But they're not worth paying for the rental fees at the gun ranges.
Fair enough. Aren't you, well, you're in Texas, and they're not just like lying around. Couldn't you ask a local child to borrow their gun?
I went to a gun range one time since I've been in Texas. Fired a gun. Someone brought multiple guns for me, so I didn't have to like pay or anything. But I know I was in Vietnam last year, and went to the Cu Chi tunnels. There was one part of it at the very end of doing the cool tour where like you learn a lot. It's fantastic, but and then at the very end there's this like tourist trap where they go, hey, want to know what it's like to shoot an AK-47? It's gonna be $50 for like 7 bullets, and then someone goes and gets the thing, and then you just hear $50 go away. I don't know if you've ever heard someone lose $50, but it sounds like brrr. Fuck.
That sounds an awful lot like the last time you spent $50 on a hooker.
No, that would go brrr, and she just won't return my calls. What am I meant to do?
Yes. So Roger Casement brokered the deal between London Committee and the Irish Volunteers. It was agreed that Childers would travel in his boat Asgard to meet Figgis, and he'd take half of the guns, and then Mary Rice's cousin Conor O'Brien would take the other half in his boat Kelpie. So along with Erskine Childers, the boat was manned by Molly Childers, Mary Spring Rice, Gordon Shepherd, and 2 fishermen from Donegal called Patrick McGinley and Charles Duggan. Despite the bad weather, the Asgard made the rendezvous with Figgis, who was on a German tugboat called Gladiator off the coast of Belgium. It took them 5 hours to transfer all the guns across, and since they filled the whole yacht, the crew had to sleep on mattresses on top of the guns for the voyage home.
Wait,
and weathered
they slept on the guns?
They slept on the guns, yeah, like...
Why?
Like modern rappers. Because they filled the boat full of guns, Jason. There was nowhere to put beds.
Under the guns for warmth.
Sleep under the guns for... I take it that you've never slept on a yacht full of guns before. You don't know the etiquette. One sleeps on top of one's guns. So in total they spent 23 days at sea and weathered what was the worst Irish storms on record since 1882. On the 26th of July 1914, they were greeted by Bulmer Hobson, the head of the IRB, and not to be confused with apple cider. He was there with 800 volunteers of Na Fianna Éireann, which is the Ireland Nationalist Youth Organisation. So they're kind of like scouts, but they work for the RA. And instead of getting badges for like putting up tents or helping elderly people across the road, they were getting a badge for gun running. Junior gun runner. They all met at Father Matthew Park and marched down to Howth. They unloaded all guns in 45 minutes and then wheeled them back towards Artane in a handcart. So I don't know how subtle they were being if there's like 800 children walking down to the harbour, and then there's a great photo of just all these kids hanging off the side of the docks beckoning for guns to be thrown up to them.
Is that like the it's like the Irish equivalent of the Girl Scout cookies?
Yes, yeah. Just going
trying to fundraise for some guns. Yeah. Get some kids out there walking around going,
"Excuse me, mister, will you sign my form for the race? We're trying to raise money for guns for the Irish."
Actually, it happened to me, I guess it's like 2 or 3 years ago now. I had a girlfriend at the time, which does happen to me occasionally. I remember being in Stephen's Green with her, and like this dude came up to me and he's like, hey man, do you want to sponsor me daughter's soccer team? And it was so obviously not a real thing, because I was covering amateur soccer in Dublin at the time. The team they were talking about was not a thing. It just didn't exist. I was like, there's a girl in front of me. I'm gonna have to just, okay, fine, here's €5, fine, take it. I'll explain this afterwards. I don't want to come across like an absolute prick right now.
Yeah.
And then instantly I had to turn around and go, do you see what happened there now was I just gave a liar €5, so they don't look like an idiot in front of their kid, and also so that someone will continue to think that I'm an acceptable mate for the future.
It's bad. Like, you see them just dragging their kid around and making them take part in this low level scams.
Yeah, it's like, she was telling me support this soccer team. Your daughter doesn't have any legs.
Is she any good in defense? Like, what's her foot skills like? Right. So that's so the scouts take care of those guns. The other half of the guns from Kelpie are transferred to Sir Thomas Miles' steam yacht off the coast of Wales, and then they land in Kilcool and Wicklow on the 1st of August, which is good timing because the same day Germany declares war on Russia, Belgium and France, effectively starting World War One. So Germany seems to have offloaded a lot of their shitty weapons to the Irish, both to the UVF and to the IFV, in an attempt to, I guess, clear the stocks and get ready for the war.
You'd think they'd just keep them, though.
Yeah, I guess they were shit, and they were making better weapons, and they wanted the money, I suppose. And
I suppose, yeah, to fund better ones. But I would just be like, just keep them anyway. Give them to somebody who's not very good with a gun. Someone who doesn't deserve...
I told you, they gave them to the UVF.
Yeah, okay, fair enough, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so just like the UVF situation, this wasn't a secret, you know, like they did, like, it wasn't legal. They'd be told not to do this, but also wasn't a secret, really. So when World War One breaks out, the British Army sends a telegram looking for Childers. They send it to the HQ of the Irish Volunteers, looking for him to come fight in World War One. So they kind of know what he's up to, I guess, but still want him to come be in the army. Childers had become more liberal in his views since the Boer War. He believed that smaller nations like Belgium and Serbia would benefit from England beating Germany, and he thought that it'd be a good bargaining chip for the Irish Volunteers to fight for Britain, because then they'd be able to use that in further negotiations. The Home Rule Bill was supposed to be passed in 1914, but it was shelved after the war broke out. And the other boatmen that had helped him do the gun running, Thomas Miles and Conor O'Brien, also went off to serve the British. So the head of the Royal Navy at the time was a young man called Winston Churchill, and he credited Childers' book, The Riddle of the Sands, for getting the public on board with increasing the Navy. And he was instrumental, apparently, in getting Childers drafted for the war, which I guess he saw as doing him a favour. So he served in the Gallipoli. He thought so. Childers
that's like when your Christmas present is a donation has been made on your behalf to a local charity.
Childers, old boy, you're a smashing gentleman, and I've pulled all the strings and I've done you a solid. Good news, you're going to serve in Turkey.
Oh, thank you. I'll get to be a war hero if I live.
So he's in Gallipoli, which is a major campaign in World War One, spearheaded by Churchill himself. So it ended up being a massive defeat for the Allies and a win.
I thought they had guns by then.
Yeah. Yes, they had a spear division. Well, this is also this is what I was talking about earlier on, like where they still had a cavalry division where people rode up, like the German army showed up in motted greys and camouflage, basically steel helmets, and the French and the British came riding in on horses with their lances and their sabers, ready to give the old Germans the kibosh. So yeah, it was a big defeat for the Allies and a huge win for the Ottoman Empire. Churchill lost his position as head of the Navy as a result of it, and it was a key factor in David George Lloyd replacing Asquith as the Prime Minister. It's also where the Anzac Union became a thing, where the Australians and New Zealand people realised that maybe they're not so different, and they got together to go die in Turkey. It's also where Hill 16 in Croke Park was originally called Hill 60 after the Battle of Hill 60 in Gallipoli, where 700 men from the 5th Battalion of the Connaught Rangers were part of the last major push of the campaign. And then it was renamed Hill 16 in memory of 1916 after the events of Bloody Sunday, when the RIC invaded Croke Park in 1920 and shot a load of lads. So I guess it was called Hill 60 between 1914 and 1920, or probably even less time. And it's been called Hill 16 ever since.
Ah, phenomenal. Never heard of that.
Yeah, there's facts within facts.
You'd almost swear we're doing like some kind of an Irish history podcast.
So Childers served out in Turkey. He returned to London in 1918 and was transferred to the newly created Royal Air Force, where he was part of a mission to begin bombing raids of Berlin, but then, unfortunately, the war ended. He left the RAF in March of 1919. At this stage, he's 49. And he was suffering from influenza and was ordered by doctors to go rest in the country. And where better place, Jason, than his old childhood house in Glendalough, where he stayed with his cousin Robert Barton. Barton introduced him to a likely lad by the name of Michael Collins, who then went on to introduce him to Dev.
That wouldn't be Dev as in the famous Irish actor Devon Murray.
No, unfortunately not. He was stuck talking to Eamon de Valera.
Right, because the guy I'm thinking of spends most of his time dealing with spells and magic and stuff. And you're thinking of Eamon de Valera, who would have spent most of his time giving the power of our country to a load of spells and magic and shit.
Very good. You really tied all that all together.
Yeah, I didn't know where I was going with that, so I'm pretty. I'm
Yeah.
glad I managed to dig myself out of a hole
You pulled it out of the bag there. But so
like a rabbit out of a hat.
Oh, the church wouldn't like that. During his time in Glendalough, Childers saw that his moderate Dominion proposal wouldn't go far enough, and he returned to London, but was shortly invited back by Sinn Féin to meet the whole party in Dublin. So he kind of figured that he was going to be offered a high up role in Sinn Féin, but apparently apart from Collins, most of them were wary of him and thought that he was probably a spy, maybe because he wrote that spy book and had served all of his life in the British Army. But he was sent to the Paris Peace Conference, which was where Ireland tried to point out that the same ideals of freedom that Britain had gone to war for in World War One were the same ideals that Ireland wanted for themselves, and perhaps maybe was a little hypocritical, and the British told them to shut the fuck up and get back to work.
Balderdash.
Absolutely nonsense. Germany's oppression from the colonies is completely different from our oppression of the colonies. So it didn't work, and Childers returns to London, but then moves to Dublin permanently with Molly and the kids in 1919. He was made Director of Propaganda for the first Irish Parliament in 1919. I think we talked about this before, but at what stage does propaganda become a sort of negative title?
When you kill 6 million Jewish people.
Ah, fair. That was the mark, was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But amazingly, why couldn't the propaganda department spin that? Surely that would be their...
Yeah, no, you're right. No, they couldn't even change the cultural representation of their own job.
Yeah.
Like, change how everyone views us. We can't even change how people view this job.
He was elected in 1921 to the second Dáil as a Sinn Féin candidate for Kildare Wicklow, and published "Is Ireland a Danger to England?" ? So in the same year, he was Secretary General of the Irish delegation that negotiated the Anglo-Irish Treaty with the British. You know, the famous treaty that Michael Collins went over that went down very well back home.
Don't know what you're talking about.
He stayed in London during the negotiations between the 11th of October and the 6th of December in 1921. But he was opposed to the final draft of the document, specifically the part where they had to swear an oath of allegiance to the Crown. In January 1922, the Dáil voted 64-57 in favour of the treaty, but that just fueled the divide between Sinn Féin.
Did that beef last for a while, or...?
No, they just said, listen, we'll have to agree to disagree. You've got a couple of good arguments. It wouldn't be my cup of tea, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I can see it from both sides. It's a judgment call, it's one way or the other, but either way we can band together and figure a way out through this together.
Yes. Well, then shortly after that, they declared civil war.
Oh, right, fair.
But
a low level civil war, not the kind of one that would like split apart a nation or father and son, brother and sister.
No.
Oh, okay.
Sure. I mean, you spent the last several hundred years of the existence of a country fighting towards freedom. You get something that sort of looks like a semblance of being able to determine your own nation's path, and then you immediately turn around and start killing each other.
That makes sense.
Which side were you on?
Do you think I'm some sort of a vampire?
Well, I mean, what do? Do you take the deal that leaves Ulster out, or do you go and fight your brothers and fathers to try and get the whole country, even though the Ulster doesn't want you? The UVF is up there, and them boys got guns now.
I know, and they're saying no.
Famously, they do say no. But Childers fought on the Free State side of the Civil War, the anti-treaty side. So he wanted the full 32 counties or nothing. But
the Devon Murray side of the war.
Exactly, the Devon Murray side. But despite the fact he had all this military history, he'd written books about British military tactics. The brass didn't trust him, probably because of the British military tactics thing. So he was never given a position of power, and at one stage he was writing letters in the staff office. He was putting addresses on them. So I only found this recently, but you can go back and look at the transcripts for all Dáil meetings going the whole way back. So you can go and see what Big Mick and the lads were talking about back in the formation of the Dáil. In June 1922, Cathal Brugha lodged a complaint against Arthur Griffith, the head of Sinn Féin, for calling
caused a big brew, haha.
He did indeed. For calling an esteemed party member a humbug, and for referring to Childers as that bloody Englishman. I feel like that, I mean, to logic...
Not acceptable. Not okay in like our parliament.
No, he hadn't said it in Parliament. He just said it, I don't know, publicly. So I think he'd had some press conference where he referred to Childers as that, or implied that Childers was just a British military man. Or maybe he called him that bloody Englishman in some press thing. Also, calling someone a humbug, that's not on. What is this? Is there no decorum anymore? I imagine Cathal Brugha blushed deep red as he had to repeat the poison. I don't even think we can say humbug on this podcast without being censored. You have to beep out all those instances.
I've always been a fan of the Arctic Monkeys.
Yeah. But you can read a transcript of the whole thing. Griffith didn't show up to the meeting to defend himself, which is a bit of a power move. So, despite the fact that Arthur Griffith and the rest of the lads didn't trust him, it was still said that Childers was the main man behind the Republican propaganda, so he became a major target for the National Army soldiers. After Mick Collins was assassinated, the Dáil introduced the Army Emergency Powers Resolution, which brought in military law in September 1922 and listed carrying a gun without a license as a capital offence.
So it was only a problem in Dublin.
If it became
a capital offence.
Oh, okay. In November 1922, Childers was captured by state forces at his house in Glendalough, where he was staying on his way to meet up with Dev. He was court-martialed and sentenced to death for being in possession of a firearm. The gun in question was a small semi-automatic pistol which had been given to him as a present by Big Mick before the two had taken opposite sides in the Civil War. He was convicted on the 20th of November, and he appealed the decision, but the judge said, "He disputes the authority of the tribunal and comes to the civil court for protection, but its answer must be that its jurisdiction is ousted by the state of war which he himself has helped to produce." So the judge there basically saying, man, it's your own damn fault.
I mean, is that... we okay with that? How do we feel?
No, I don't. I mean, it's not as if he's using the gun. It's like Michael Collins gave him the gun as a present, which, I mean, bit of a weird present, Mick, but there you go. And then the National Army wanted to get any charge on him because they think he's the head of the propaganda. They can't find anything to pin on him, and then they raid the house, find this gun. They've got their man as far as they're concerned.
Oh no, I can see it from their point of view, but also if you knew that people were out to get you and you knew that you had something that was illegal, like it is his own fault. Like
but I think
it's 100% his own fault.
The gun might have just been in the house because he wasn't staying in the house, and the
gun was just resting in his account.
Exactly. But so Childers' lawyer appealed to the High Court. Before this was heard, he was taken to be shot on the 24th of November, which I feel like if you've got an appeal in, they probably should wait until afterwards. I mean, it's not like a fine, you can't really exactly pay it back. Supposedly it was ordered that the squad consist of only ex-British Army men. He shook hands with every member of the firing squad, and his last words to him were, "Take a few steps closer, lads, it'll be easier that way." And they shot him.
What would your last words in front of a firing squad be?
Please, 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 oh God, please.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense. Mine would be, I would try to time it directly before the head dude would like give the order, and then just beforehand I'd yell, "There's no smoke without," and then he'd say,
yes, my sex is on fire.
Yeah, that would be another way of doing my joke, but just worse.
Everyone loves the Kings of Leon, Jason. So that's it. Yeah, so he smuggled guns for them. Like the guns that he brought into Howth would have been used in 1916, and then they arrested him and executed him for having a gun, which is I don't know if it's irony, but it's certainly something.
irony.
It's yes, that is exactly what it is. So before he died, he made his 16-year-old son promise that he would seek out every man who had signed his death warrant and shake their hand. Which, initially when I read that, I thought that was going to become some cool Tarantino-esque film where he'd hunt them all down. But he held no grudges. That son was none other than Erskine Hamilton Childers, who went on to become the 4th President of Ireland, the Free Nation.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, so this is his son. Because initially I wanted to do a story about Erskine the President because it's such a cool name.
Oh yeah, because if your name's Erskine the President, you're gonna have some good stories about you.
And then it turns out his dad was far more interesting. So, old Winston Churchill said of Childers, "No man has done more harm or shown more genuine malice or endeavour to bring a greater curse upon the common people of Ireland than this strange being, actuated by a deadly and malignant hatred for the land of his birth."
Jesus.
And old De Valera said, "He died the prince he was. Of all the men I ever met, I would say he was the noblest." And Dev, he's met a lot of men.
Daniel Radcliffe.
True.
For one.
Yes. Well, actually, this ties into your favourite movie, Michael Collins. So
My favourite movie is Pootie Tang, and you know that.
I do know that, but this is your second favourite. So remember, there's a scene, I think, where they're testing out guns, which is underneath the Marino Casino, which is, apparently casino is just an old building, but it rhymes, so it's funny. Do you remember that scene?
Yes.
Yeah, so apparently...
It's all grey. There's like... Am I thinking of a round table discussion?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a rectangle table.
Yes, yeah. But, so apparently that's where they... So yeah, they got shit guns during the Howth Gun-Running, as that event would be called. But it's also apparently one of the first uses of the Tommy machine gun was used during the War of Independence. And that's where they tried them out, was underneath Marino Casino.
Very before they riddled Capone.
Yes, yeah, way before Capone. They were riddling Irishmen. So Molly Childers requested that all of Erskine's papers and documents would be locked up for the next 50 years. So a biography wasn't written about Erskine until 1971. There was also accusations that Molly was a spy, based on, I guess, moving back and forth between London, her husband being British. I don't know. But Nessa Childers, who is a politician, I think she ran for the Green Party before, and she was elected into the European Parliament for a while there. But she said that Molly, up until the day she died, had photographs of Liam Mellows, Liam Brady and Rory O'Connor on her bedside, and she revered them.
Many an Irish person would have grown up with photos of Liam Brady on their wall.
Yes. It is such a weird thing to, to have a picture of the Holy Cross up there and to have a picture of Dev.
No, in my view, having a Holy Cross up there right beside Liam Brady would make perfect sense.
Yeah. And then, as a final wrap-up note, Erskine's yacht, Asgard, was bought by the state in 1961 as a training vessel. I mean, they say it was a training vessel. I assume they just bought it because it's a cool piece of history where they smuggle guns into the state. But they used it as a training vessel, and then it was kept in Cominum Gael for a while, and it was reconstructed, and it's now on display in the National Museum of Ireland. Myself and James Moran went there the other weekend to check it out. You can't get in the yacht, but you can see it. It's pretty nice.
Are you going doing history things with comedians who aren't me?
Yeah, well, I wanted to go down and get some pictures of the yacht.
You couldn't have waited until May 2021?
No, unfortunately not. I needed them for this podcast.
That's fair enough. Well, that's I'm going to give you some credit. That's a great story.
It's interesting. So
yeah, imagine if it was all true.
I know. It's pretty good fiction.
Yeah. And you're saying who wrote this again? J.K. Rowling.
Yes, it's a magical story. Erskine got a letter from an owl and went on to become one of the greatest wizards of all time.
He got a letter from a wasp.
Yeah. But I found that interesting that Childers went off to fight. Like, he bought weapons off the Germans, and then literally 2 weeks later they declared war on Britain, and he went off to fight them. Did he feel betrayed? That's a bit of a switch around.
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine at the time he was like, he probably knew while he was buying the guns from the Germans, these aren't the most upstanding of folk, but for the moment they're helping us beat, in some people's eyes, a worse group of...
Sure. Well, when Figgis was over there buying the guns, he's just being directed towards some dusty old box of battered up rifles. Meanwhile, the Germans are flat out producing these fine top of the line weapons. Is it, where are all these going?
No, don't go look at. No, don't look at these. No, you wouldn't want these.
Don't worry about it, man. You won't see these again. But I find it really interesting how a man can go from growing up in like the most Tory background, and then over the course of his years, gradually go from being anti-home rule, being home rule, wanting Dominion status, thinking Dominion status is not enough, going over to try and get a treaty, ended up fighting for the Free States and dying for the Free States. It's an interesting trajectory. But yeah, that's it. That's the story of Erskine Childers, or Erskine Childers, or Erskine Childers. Be a good name for a snake.
Ah, yes. If you...
He does actually sound like a Harry Potter character.
A bit, yeah, doesn't he? What do you think his Horcrux would be?
His Horcrux?
Yeah.
The treaty that Michael Collins signed and the pen that he stabbed Ireland in the back with.
Fantastic. Right. See you next week.
Good luck.